Good morning, everybody. Jim Feist and Hank Goldberg out here in Las Vegas enjoying the weather as it changes from the hundreds down into the 90s, although we're going to tip 100 a couple times before we get settled in for a fall, maybe in the 85 every day. Hank, how you enjoying your first couple months in Vegas?
I'm enjoying it. For a second there, I thought I was talking to Brian Norcross.
Yeah, I do the weather on the side.
Yeah.
And I do it well, by the way.
Well, it's a lot easier than picking football games.
Well, that's true. That's true. You're a little bit more consistent. We got the NFL card. Of course, we got some bye teams this week. We start with that, and Pittsburgh bounced back with a big win the other night. They almost gave it up. Fitzpatrick had a tale of two halves. The first half was terrible, and the second half was fantastic. Interesting.
Well, they've got. I think they got a tough week. It's a short week, and they're traveling, and then I think they're going to have a tough time, and I think Fitzpatrick may have a tough game. They're going up against pretty good defense.
Have they decided that it's going to be Jameis Winston or Fitzpatrick?
Oh, and it won't be Winston. It'll be Fitzpatrick. Winston's got a lot of work to do to catch up, and and frankly, Fitzpatrick should keep the job right now. He had a great second half after throwing 3 picks in the first half. I think for the time being, Fitzpatrick's going to keep the job.
Makes sense. He's not the future, but right now I think the players on the team like Fitzpatrick, and I'm not sure they like Winston at all, but I can't tell that. But we got some the New England Patriots, 2 double-digit losses in a row. Very unusual situation. Father Time is undefeated. Is it time to watch New England go down the drain a little bit, or are they going to bounce back?
Well, they started off bad last year, remember, they're going to get Edelman back, and they're going to get the other wide receiver back. So that'll take pressure off Gronk, and they got some work to do on defense. I'm not sure what to make in New England right now. I know that the last 5 times Miami played at Foxborough, they lost by an average of 19 points. So we'll see how good Miami is. And I think this is a game that definitely favors the Patriots.
Well, the situation certainly does, that's for sure. Definitely an advantage Patriots in the situation. Whether or not they can turn around and start producing some points is another question. I mean, the one game they did win, they won, they covered by a half a point over the Texans, and the Texans haven't played a good game yet. The Texans, by the way, have gotten a lot of money this week. They started as a 3-point dog at Indianapolis, and it's down to 1, 1.5, 2. So they've gotten some money. They've gotten some support. Luck has played pretty well. The Colts have played pretty well. A little interesting that they're putting their money on.
I'll tell you something interesting about Luck. His average per completion is way down. So they've been very careful with him. He's been throwing a lot of short passes because they've had him getting the ball out of there quickly. They don't want him getting hit. And so this may be an opportunity for for Houston, who has some good defensive players, to kind of jam up the middle and the short passes that he's been throwing and take that away from him. It'll be kind of interesting to see what kind of a game this is going to be.
Yeah, well, all the games are interesting. What do you think about the injuries in the season?
Well, it's interesting. I'm giving you an aspect of the game as to why this is going to be an interesting game.
Well, you're right. They said early that the Colts would try to keep him from trying to go deep because their offensive line wasn't strong enough to protect him. And they're doing exactly that, which is kind of unusual. A coach actually says they're going to do something, and they actually do it. So that's a big plus. The thing about Houston is they haven't looked anywhere near what everybody thought they were going to be. The quarterback threw for over 300 yards last week, but he just doesn't look like the same guy. You know, maybe he's got a little bit more work to do to get back into that kind of form.
He's been throwing for over 300 yards every week. He had the week before he threw for 334 yards.
Well, what do they need to do to win? If he can do that,
Score.
What are they doing wrong?
They're not scoring.
A lot of yards that aren't producing points. Yeah. Well.
Not scoring, and the clock ran out on him the week before. Game ended on the 20-yard line. They didn't have any timeouts left. That's bad coaching. It's real simple.
We've talked about Bill O'Brien a couple times. I don't know that he's going to overnight become a good coach. So I'm not too sure about that. The Cincinnati-Atlanta game, there's injuries on both sides of that game. Atlanta has some defensive players out. Cincinnati's banged up on the offensive side. I don't know if they're going to play or not. We haven't got a final on that.
Well, they need to get A.J. Green healthy and Mixon healthy. Won't know till later in the week if those two guys are going to play. They're hopeful of getting them back. But without them, and Dalton didn't have a great game last week. So but that could be a tough game for Atlanta's defense. I think they've got 4 guys, 2 guys out for the season, and they lost 2 more last week.
Yeah, they're really they're a mash unit. They're a mess right now on defense, no question. That it should open up a lot of scoring. If you look at that, it's potential for scoring. But Cincinnati needs Mixon and AJ healthy for them to do any scoring. Line opened at 6. Atlanta down to 5. Total went up from 48 to 51. So they are expecting scoring.
Well, the Cincinnati has a good running back available to them. Although Mixon is a top guy, but their backup has run fairly well. But if they don't have Green, that makes a big dent in their passing game, obviously.
Huge. He's definitely one of the best, no question. Wentz came back last week and he played reasonably well, but you know he's still a little bit rusty. Tennessee, they haven't been able to produce points all year. Mariota, is Mariota. He threw for 100 yards last week. Ran for 50.
Well, he only played a half.
Yeah. He
came in the second half, and he had 3 possessions, and they scored in all 3. And a lot of that yardage he made was on plays where he ran, but he was effective, and their defense is playing as well as any defense in the league right now. I mean, they shut down a team that had been scoring a lot of points, and in Jacksonville, and they could actually give Philadelphia a tough game because their defense is playing so well. Vrabel is a very good coach.
Vrabel's doing a great job. He's very creative guy. He's
a sharp guy.
Must be. Seattle turned it around last week and were able to beat Dallas. Now they go down to Arizona, who's going to start Josh Rosen. Did Seattle turn a corner, or was that just because they ran into Dallas, who's not playing very well? Seattle, 12th man at home. Think they got a little bit more to offer now that they're going down to Arizona, who's not really played very well this year. Now they're going to the Kid.
Well, Seattle got Wright back, and they got the other defensive guy back, and they still have a quarterback who can score, and they've got a couple of good receivers, so they can play good enough to beat teams without a lot of offense, and so they could be all right at Arizona, which isn't a very good team. Dallas is an interesting team this week because they're home and they're a slight favorite over Detroit. Detroit had a big game against New England. Whether they can put together back-to-back games is, to me, highly questionable. One thing that Dallas has that New England doesn't have is a running game, and I think that could make a difference in Detroit's defense, which is not strong against the run. So I actually think Dallas is in a good position to win this week.
Yeah, the line opened 3.5, and it's down to 3, but a lot of juice on the 3, 115 and stuff like that. So it's really, the reality is the line is between 3 and 3.5. The total went down a notch from 44 to 43.5. Stafford is a dangerous guy. I think is a very underrated quarterback, but he's never had a lot of talent around him. But he's a tough quarterback, and especially when they get down, he's a great quarterback to play in the fourth quarter if they're down. He does usually make a pretty good run at the end of the game.
Well, Dallas has an injury on defense. I think Lee is out, one of the better defensive players.
That's a big loss to them. Yeah, he's a great player. Buffalo pulled off the biggest upset of the year, 17-point dog. They beat the hell out of Minnesota. Now they go to Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers he's definitely not right. He's hobbling around on that one leg. I don't know. I don't know if that leg potentially gets any better by playing on it, or should he be resting it? It seems like he should be resting it, but I guess you still need to try to win football games. So it's a tough situation.
Well, I think Buffalo benefited from the fact that first of all, they were on the road last week, and I think that I don't look for much out of Buffalo this week. They benefited from the fact that this was a game that there was strictly a look-ahead situation. I don't think Minnesota prepared for them at all. I don't think they spent 1 minute of time looking at film for them, and nothing prepared for them. They didn't want to show anything because of what they had coming up this Thursday. I think they spent the whole week preparing for the Rams. I think you'll see a different Minnesota team this week. And, this is a game where Minnesota will show up. Rams, while they lost their two cornerbacks, they've got two good replacements in Hill and Shields. So, this is a team that was really prepared for this season. But the two corners they have, two new guys coming in there, that disrupts the defense a little bit. So we'll see what happens with that game.
This is that's a marquee game. You're talking about potential NFC Championship game at the end of the year with those two teams. And the Rams are a 7-point favorite, and there's actually juice on the favorite, so it could actually go higher based on that juice if it keeps leaning that direction. But that's normally the Thursday night traveling team has a big disadvantage because of the short week. They don't have the same number of days to recover from the bumps and bruises they had. They don't have the same preparation time, and they have to do the traveling by getting on the road and going out there. So it's the Thursday night home team has had an advantage for many years because of that. I don't know if that'll hold up here. Minnesota didn't put up much of a fight last week, and they a lot of times teams that play really bad, they bounce back, and they did play really bad. So it makes it a difficult handicap.
Well, they didn't put any preparation time in for Buffalo, and Buffalo does have a decent defense, but and they didn't show anything. They didn't run much of their offense. They just treated it like a preseason game, and they paid. So they spent all their practice time getting ready for this game. So it's not a typical shortage of prep time for a Thursday night game.
Good point. Are there any other games that you want to discuss, or anything in baseball or horses or anything like that? The New England-Miami game, this is a big game for the Patriots because they could fall far behind Miami, which is in first place right now. I think this is a Miami team that has benefited from a scheduling advantage so far. They've played, against teams that aren't too good so far, and but maybe New England's not so good either. We'll find out. Well, like you said, they're going to get players back. Are they getting them back for this game?
No, they still have one more week.
So that means that they're still absent a lot of offensive weapons.
No, the suspensions are for 4 weeks.
Right. They're absent. They haven't been able to produce much on the offensive end, and they're double and triple teaming Gronk. It makes it difficult. This game, that opens 7.5. We're seeing 7s for the most part. I see a couple of 6.5s. The Patriots have been a money machine over the years, but not so far this year. And like I said, the first game where they did cover, they covered by 0.5 point against the Texans. Is anything going on in the horse racing world this weekend, Hank?
There's a bunch of stakes races at Belmont on Saturday, including a $700,000 stakes race. And then there's the Joe Hirsch, which is a big grass race named after the former, the late great turf rider, who was a good friend of mine. And he was a great friend of my dad's too. He was an amazing sports writer who, even in his later years, outperformed a lot of his peers. And So he's so there. I think there are 4 stakes races on the card at Belmont on Saturday, as a lot of these horsemen get ready for the Breeders' Cup, which is coming up in early November.
Was your dad involved in the horse racing industry, Hank?
He was a sports writer, and he covered a lot of the big races, Triple Crown races. He covered the Derby and the Preakness every year, and the Belmont. And so he knew Joe. Joe Hirsch, by the way, was a racing writer who, when the Jets drafted Joe Namath, Sonny Werblin, who owned the Jets, went to Joe Hirsch and said he's got this green kid from Alabama coming to New York. Asked Joe Hirsch to look after him. And so Joe Hirsch was Joe Namath's roommate when Joe Namath first came to New York. They shared an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and they were roommates for 2 or 3 years, I think, and they remained good friends for a long time.
So your dad covered sports and horses, and pretty much you followed in his footsteps.
Well, he was a major sports columnist for Spaper, so he covered everything that was big, including Olympics, and traveled with the New York Giants football team, and covered the Yankees for 40 years. And he had a big job.
Wow. He saw all the old greats. Yep.
Oh yeah. Yep. He and DiMaggio were very close, which is how I became friendly with Joe. And DiMaggio really liked him a lot and was close to our family. And so when I first moved to Miami, I played golf with Joe a lot. And I hung out with him. I always went to spring training with the Yankees, and then after I started working, I was working in New York. I went to I took my vacation during spring training and came down to Florida and hung out with Joe a lot.
Wow.
I knew him very well.
That's some great stories. We're running out of time here today, so Hank's plays are up at jimfeist.com, as well as mine. Hank bounced back with a big week in pro football last week, and we both liked the card this week, so I think we're going to do some good things. And the college football is rounding into shape. I don't know if anybody can step up and beat Alabama, but Hank and I are beating the game. We'll figure out ways to make money beating the point spread. But Alabama, they didn't cover last week, but they're a pretty tough team.
Well, they didn't cover because they're favored by almost 30 points every week.
Yeah.
And Clemson is changing quarterbacks. That's kind of newsworthy, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think we've been doing pretty well with the college football projections every week, and it's I don't know. I think this is a challenging NFL card this week, starting with the Thursday night game. And I don't know, as you said, this is the beginning of the bye week, so the card is a little limited. But hey, we found out last week there were some major teams that lost that weren't supposed to lose at this time of year. So and by the way, I think the baseball season is now, they're getting ready for the playoffs. So
yeah,
not a lot of great opportunities with baseball right now.
It's very difficult in baseball because of the prices being so high. There's a couple teams that have to win, but the prices are enormous, and it's very difficult. So I'm waiting for the playoffs to start. Looks like Oakland's going to play the Yankees in the play-in game. And we'll be handicapping that as well as the rest of the teams. Hank, have a great day. Thank you for your time, and thank you everybody out there for listening. And don't forget, go to jimfeist.com for Hank's plays and mine. Thanks, Hank.
All right, Jim. Thank you.